All right, so are you ready to really fine-tune your English? Today we're going to do a deep dive into common mistakes that people make. And thankfully, you've given me some awesome material. Looks like it's a script for a YouTube channel called Fluent English Vibes. I'm excited to go through it.
It's a good choice. A lot of people think they have the basics down, but even small slip-ups can make a difference in how you come across, especially in professional settings, or when you're trying to make a good first impression.
Definitely. So let's just jump right in. The first thing they talk about in this script is incorrect verb usage. And their first example is, she go to school every day. I feel this is a pretty common one.
Yeah, it's a very common one, especially for those learning English as a second language. What's going on here is something called subject-verb agreement. The verb has to match the subject. Like, is it singular or is it plural? In this case, she is singular, so go has to become goes.
Okay, so she goes to school every day.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Now, what about this one? The script also mentions this verb tense mistake. I didn't went to the party. It's a little hard to hear, isn't it?
I know, it's painful. We all know that when we use the auxiliary verb did in the past tense, the main verb just stays in its base form. So it should be, I didn't go to the party.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to prepositions, those tiny words that can cause big problems.
Yeah.
The script gives us this example. I'm interested for learning English. I can see why this is wrong, but can you explain it?
So prepositions show us the relationship between the words in a sentence. And in this situation, interested is usually followed by preposition in when you're talking about something that interests you. So it should be, I'm interested in learning English.
So using the wrong preposition just makes the meaning of the sentence less clear.
Exactly.
All right, what about this one? The script also has this one. He is married with her. I feel like that's wrong too.
It is. The right preposition here is to. He is married to her. Because with implies companionship, but to specifically indicates the state of marriage. It's a tiny word, but it makes a big difference in the meaning.
Okay. Are you ready to talk about mispronounced words? This is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. English pronunciation can be a challenge. Let's start with Wednesday. The Fluent English Vibe script has somebody pronouncing it as Wednesday. Do you know where they're going wrong?
Well, we know that the D is silent. It's Wednesday.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. And a lot of these silent letters are just remnants of how the word was pronounced hundreds of years ago.
Like a little history lesson.
Yeah. And this reminds me of another word that's often mispronounced, salmon.
Oh, yeah. Salmon. People always say that.
It's salmon. The L is silent. English has so many words with these silent letters, like the K in knife or the GF in night.
It's a secret code. Okay, so speaking of codes, let's decode articles a, an, and the. The script gives us these examples. I saw in university, and she is a best player. I think I know what's wrong here, but tell me what you think.
Yeah, so the first one is wrong because we use "and" before a mouth sound. University starts with a consonant sound, that Y sound. So it should be, I saw a university. And the second one is wrong because best is a superlative adjective. It's comparing her to everybody else. And superlatives like best, worst, or most always use the before them. So it should be, she is the best player.
That makes sense. So how about word order? The script has a few examples of how getting the word order wrong can completely change the meaning of a sentence. Like this one, I every day go to the gym. And this one, she always is happy. Why do these sound wrong?
Word order in English is very specific. The standard structure is subject plus verb plus object plus time. So the first sentence should be, I go to the gym every day. And in the second sentence, we need to change the placement of the adverb. Adverbs describing how often something happens usually go after the verb to be. So it should be, she is always happy.
Okay, that makes sense. And you know what else can make a sentence sound a bit off? When someone overuses the word very. The script has this fun little game where they replace very with a stronger synonym. Want to try it?
Sure.
Okay, you go first. Give me a phrase with very in it.
Okay, how about very tired?
Exhausted.
Perfect. Okay, your turn. How about very small?
Tiny.
Good. Okay, I got another one. Very angry.
Furious. Okay, last one. Very hungry. See. It's amazing how just one word can add so much more personality to a sentence. Okay, let's talk about spelling. And specifically those annoying homophones. The ones that sound the same but have totally different spellings and meanings. The Fluent English Vibe script goes through a couple of really common examples like there, and then your and your.
Oh, yeah, those are tricky, even for native speakers.
So what advice would you give to somebody who keeps mixing these words up?
Well, I always tell people to think about the context. Like, what's the sentence about? Are we talking about possession, a place, or a contraction? Once you know that you can usually figure out the right spelling, you can also come up with your own mnemonic devices. Like I tell my students to remember that there has an apostrophe because it's replacing the A and R.
That's helpful. You know, one of the things I like about the Fluent English Vibe script is that it encourages people to not be afraid of making mistakes.
Definitely. Everyone makes mistakes. It's totally normal. And it's how we learn.
Right? It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you figure it out.
Exactly. Mistakes are just stepping stones.
So instead of seeing mistakes as failures,
Hmm.
we should see them as opportunities to improve.
Yes. And I think it's time to move on to the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. There's so much more to uncover. Okay, so we're back, and we're still talking about all those common mistakes that English learners make. And I really like how this Fluent English Vibe script talks about how it can make you feel too, like feeling afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people are scared to make mistakes. It's totally natural.
Yeah, and the script actually tells viewers to not worry about it and to see mistakes as a chance to learn.
That's a great way to look at it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's really important. It's so easy to get caught up in wanting to be perfect, but really the only way we learn is by making mistakes.
That's so true. And the script also mentions how important it is to practice consistently.
Yeah, that's something I totally agree with. Even just talking to native speakers or reading books and watching movies, it all helps.
Exactly. The more you can surround yourself with the language, the better. And the script also encourages viewers to leave comments and ask questions, which is another great way to practice.
I like that. It makes it more interactive.
Yeah.
So as an expert, what are some other mistakes you've seen people make that maybe aren't in the script?
That's a good question. One that I see a lot is people getting confused about countable and uncountable nouns. Like they might say advices or informations, but those are uncountable nouns. They don't have a plural form.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I've heard that too. And people also mix up much and many.
Right. You have to remember which one goes with countable and uncountable nouns.
It's tricky.
Oh,
And what about phrasal verbs? Those are always confusing.
oh yeah, those can be hard because they're like idioms.
Right, like put up with or get away with. Can't always understand the meaning just from the words themselves.
Yeah, you have to learn them as a whole phrase, and they don't always translate well into other languages.
It's like they're little puzzles. And even with all these things that can be difficult, I think it's important to remember that language is about expressing yourself. It's not always about being perfect.
I completely agree. Language is beautiful even when it's not perfect. It's always changing, and there's always room for creativity.
Right. It's like dancing. You learn the steps, but then you can add your own style.
I like that. And just like with dancing, the most important thing is to have fun. Like the Fluent English Vibe script says, keep learning and keep practicing and never stop being curious.
I love that. And, I feel like I always learn something new every time I talk about language. So before we finish this part, do you have any advice for our listener, for someone who's trying to improve their English?
I would just say don't be afraid to make mistakes. And have fun with it. Learn about where words come from. Look at how English is different in different places. The more you learn about it, the more you'll enjoy it.
That's great advice. This Fluent English Vibe script has been really interesting. But before we wrap up the whole deep dive, I wanted to talk about some of the online resources that are available for language learners now. It's crazy how much things have changed with technology. It really feels like there are endless possibilities now. There are apps, websites, all these things that can help you learn English. But I still feel like I'm stuck with the old ways.
Yeah.
You know, textbooks and flashcards. Have you found any online resources that are really helpful?
Oh, definitely. There's one called Youglish. It's really great for pronunciation practice. You just type in a word or a phrase, and you can see videos of native speakers saying it in different ways.
That's so cool. I can
Yeah.
see how that would be really useful for learning how to say a word correctly.
It really helps you get a feel for the rhythm and intonation. And, if you want to improve your vocabulary, there's nothing like just reading.
Yeah, reading is so important. But there are so many books out there. How do you even know where to start?
The most important thing is to choose something you actually like. Fiction, nonfiction, even just articles online or blog posts, as long as you enjoy it. And don't be afraid to start with something easier. There are books that are specially written for people who are learning English.
Yeah, that's a good idea. When I was learning Spanish, I started with children's books. Sounds kind of silly, but it really helped me learn the basics. So what about grammar? Do you think it's important?
Grammar is important. It's like the structure of the language. But it shouldn't be about memorizing a bunch of rules. It's more about understanding how the language works.
Right. It's like learning the rules of a game so you can play it better.
Exactly. And the more you use grammar, the better you'll get at it.
So it's not just about studying it. You have to actually use it when you're speaking and writing. And that goes back to the main point of that Fluent English 5 script, to just enjoy the process of learning English. It's about making mistakes and figuring things out, and then finally being able to say what you want to say.
I like that. You know, it's interesting that we started out talking about common mistakes, but we ended up talking about all the good things about learning English.
Yeah, it just goes to show that even those little mistakes can teach us a lot about the language.
Absolutely. This has been a really great conversation. Any final words for our listeners?
Yeah, just keep learning and keep practicing. And most importantly, have fun with it. Language is amazing. There's always something new to learn.
That's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much for being here. And to all of our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, even those little mistakes are just steps on the path to becoming more fluent. So keep practicing and have fun, and we'll see you next time.